The moment I knew I was done being their safety net was when I heard Brooke Sterling call me the mainframe guy outside the break room. She laughed into her phone, probably on speaker with some venture capital buddy. He keeps the legacy stuff running, but honestly, we need to modernize past these dinosaur systems. Then the door opened and I stepped out, made direct eye contact, and walked past her like I hadn't heard a thing. Inside, though, something clicked off. Not dramatically, just clean and final, like unplugging an old server that's been humming in the corner for decades. I'm Preston Hawthorne, 47 years old, and I'd been with Valent Systems for 23 years. Senior infrastructure architect, the guy who built the disaster recovery systems that kept us running during the 2008 financial meltdown. I didn't pitch at conferences or demo flashy features. I kept $1.8 billion in daily banking transactions flowing smoothly for 180 credit unions across the country. When systems crashed at 3 a.m., my phone rang first. When federal auditors came asking about SOX compliance, they sat in my office. And 4 years ago, I quietly, legally inserted myself into the most overlooked document in our entire infrastructure, the source code Escrow protocol. Not because I wanted revenge, because I didn't trust anyone else to remember what it protected. Brooke Sterling was CEO Gerald Sterling's niece, 31 years old, Wharton MBA with a Stanford Tech Accelerator certificate hanging on her wall like a participation trophy. Gerald himself was 58, built the company from nothing back in 1999, and still showed up to meetings in flannel shirts and work boots. He'd brought Brooke in 6 months ago as VP Strategic Innovation, which apparently meant questioning everything that worked and replacing it with everything that didn't. Her strategy involved eliminating anything she couldn't understand in a 10-minute PowerPoint and slapping digital transformation labels on the wreckage. Within her first month, she was reviewing what she called cost optimization opportunities. I knew what that meant. Spreadsheets without context, red lines through roles like mine, and late-night whispers about streamlining legacy personnel. She started calling our back-end systems technical debt in meetings, like 23 years of bulletproof banking infrastructure was some kind of mortgage we needed to pay off. The irony was, if she'd asked, I would have walked her through every system we built, every contingency we planned for, every regulation we had to follow. But Brooke didn't believe in asking. She believed in disrupting. And apparently, I was the kind of disruption that needed to be disrupted. So I did what I always did. I kept the wheels turning, renewed the compliance certifications, rotated the security tokens, and maintained the escrow checkpoint where my name sat securely listed as the primary validator. If the company was sold, breached, or went bankrupt, that code vault was our emergency parachute, untouched unless disaster struck, or unless someone like Brooke accidentally pulled the ripcord. The thing is, she had no idea it existed. I don't mean she didn't understand it, I mean she literally didn't know we had an escrow protocol. During a quarterly infrastructure review, she scrolled past the escrow entry like it was a typo, called it legacy overhead, and told her assistant to flag it for removal consideration. I remember sitting there, watching her dismiss the one thing that stood between us and regulatory catastrophe. And I said nothing. I wasn't ready yet. Gerald still ran the board meetings, still trusted the people who'd been in the trenches. But lately, he'd gone quiet. Let her run presentations about velocity optimization and legacy modernization. I think he wanted to believe the company could evolve past its foundations. What he didn't realize was I was the foundation. You know what it's like being the only person in the room who remembers why we built things the way we did? It's like watching someone take apart a bomb because they don't like the color of the wires. It's exhausting, watching people reinvent disasters you already solved 15 years ago. The town hall was supposed to be routine, some quarterly update with pre-approved talking points and polite applause. But Brooke had bigger plans. She took the virtual stage like she was launching a rocket, all energy and buzzwords, practically vibrating with whatever podcast had convinced her she was the next Steve Jobs. Valent Systems is entering our acceleration phase, she announced, like she'd discovered fire. Behind her, slides changed every 8 seconds. Digital-first integration, client-centric workflows, zero-friction deployment pipelines. Then came the roadmap, complete back-end modernization. Deployment cycles cut from 6 weeks to 2. Legacy compliance reviews moved to post-launch optimization phases. It was like watching someone duct tape rocket boosters to a shopping cart and call it aerospace engineering. Nobody said anything because nobody wanted to be the guy who questioned progress on a company-wide call. So I asked, calmly, What's the fallback protocol if the deployment fails critical transactions? You'd think I'd asked her to explain quantum physics in Mandarin. Her smile froze. She blinked 3 times. I'm sorry, Preston. Are you suggesting we plan for failure? I'm suggesting we plan for reality. These transaction APIs handle Federal Reserve protocols. If we bypass the escrow checkpoints and something breaks, we can't just roll back. We're talking about regulatory violations that could... She muted me. Actually muted me. In front of 87 attendees, including the junior developers, legal team, and Gerald himself, who was on the call but off camera as usual, probably fixing something in his garage. A couple people gasped. One engineer's camera went dark like he'd ducked under his desk. Brooke kept talking like nothing happened. Let's stay focused on solutions, not obstacles. And just like that, the call moved on. Nobody unmuted me, nobody said a word, but the Slack messages started immediately. 9:12 a.m., Brooke Sterling. Preston, let's not derail momentum with hypothetical scenarios. 9:13 a.m., Brooke Sterling. Your resistance to innovation has been noted. We're optimizing team dynamics soon. Might be time to consider whether this is still the right fit for you. 9:14 a.m., Brooke Sterling. And BTW, chain of command exists for a reason. You report to the CTO, not directly to strategy. No punctuation, just stacked threats like poker chips. I stared at the screen and typed exactly 3 words. 9:15 a.m. Preston Hawthorne. Copy that. I didn't need to argue with her on Slack. That's what she wanted, a paper trail of me acting out, documentation of insubordination she could wave at HR. Instead, I went quiet. The next morning, HR scheduled a quick sync. Chelsea Morrison joined the video call with her practiced, concerned face already loaded. She was 32, deeply committed to work-life balance and conscious leadership, the kind of person who said circle back without irony. Hey Preston, thanks for jumping on. We wanted to get your perspective on yesterday's town hall. There's been some feedback about tone. I let the silence stretch. Feedback from who? Well, several stakeholders mentioned that your question about failure scenarios might have disrupted the positive energy Brooke's trying to build. So asking about regulatory compliance disrupts positive energy? Her smile got thinner. It's more about collaborative communication. Brooke's working really hard to align everyone around our digital transformation goals. I thanked her for her time and left the call. Then I opened the escrow documentation. Clause 17C, termination of designated validator without procedural review. It sat there in black and white, embedded in our contract with Secure Vault Inc., the third-party firm managing our source code escrow. If the primary validator was removed without formal compliance review, the repository would lock automatically for 96 hours, requiring external audit clearance to restore access. Brooke had just fired the opening shot. She had no idea she'd aimed it at a minefield. The execution came 2 days later during what she called a strategic realignment update. I logged in 3 minutes early and watched 82 people join the call, their faces showing various degrees of anxiety. Brooke's camera came on with that perfect lighting that made her look like she was ascending to thought leadership heaven. Thanks everyone for joining on short notice. I want to start by acknowledging the incredible momentum we've been building. This company is evolving, and sometimes evolution means optimizing certain functions for scale. I felt my pulse steady out, the way it does when you finally see the thing you've been waiting for. As part of this evolution, we'll be transitioning away from some legacy operational roles, including Preston's position, just like that. Transitioned away. Like I was a software license they decided not to renew. His contributions have been appreciated, Brooke continued, smiling like she was announcing a promotion, and we wish him all the best as we move forward into our next chapter. Silence. Mouse clicks. Probably Slack messages exploding in the background. I didn't move, didn't react. I just reached off camera and held up my security badge. Nothing dramatic, just a simple plastic rectangle with my photo on it. A few people in the corner squares tilted their heads. Then I rotated it slowly until the small holographic seal near the bottom caught the light. A faint triangle over a vault icon, barely visible, but anyone in legal would recognize it immediately. It was the validator seal issued by Secure Vault Inc. That seal wasn't just decoration. It meant I was the named validator on our escrow protocol. And if I was removed without compliance review, the vault sealed shut automatically. No override, no emergency access, no exceptions. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. You could feel it ripple through the call, not among the executives who were too clueless to understand, but among the engineers who built these systems every day. One back-end developer's eyes went wide. Our senior compliance officer reached for his phone. Brooke kept talking about celebration and next chapters and strategic focus. I turned off my camera, logged out, and walked away. 18 minutes later, I was sitting on my back deck with a cup of coffee and my neighbor's cat, who'd apparently decided my porch was his second home. My phone started buzzing with messages, emails, missed calls. One from Gerald himself. I ignored them all. I knew what came next. The panic, the scramble, the slowly dawning realization that Brooke hadn't just fired someone. She'd triggered a lockout protocol and the timer was already running. The calls started going out 18 minutes after I left the meeting. That's when the ripples turned into waves. Legal pinged HR. HR pinged legal. Someone in IT asked if anyone could explain why the deployment pipeline had suddenly thrown an authentication error. Then someone realized Gerald Sterling had been on the call the entire time. Silent, invisible, but present. That was the moment Brooke's confidence started cracking. According to screenshots that got passed around later, because nothing stays private in a company that runs on Slack and shared Google Docs, the first message from legal was brutal in its simplicity. 10:51 a.m. Legal, did you just terminate the escrow validator without review? Brooke didn't reply in Slack. She walked into the legal department like someone who thought her last name was still Armour. I wasn't there, but I got a play-by-play from someone in accounting who'd always appreciated how I fixed her computer without making her feel stupid about it. By the time Brooke walked out of legal, the CTO had canceled 2 product demos, and our compliance officer was deep in a 3-year-old binder with my signature on every page. Clause 17C, the one she'd never read, the one I'd built like a silent dead man's switch, triggered only when someone got arrogant enough to cut the wrong wire. Around 11:15 a.m., Gerald Sterling finally spoke up on the emergency call they'd pulled together. You could hear the quiet hum of what was either shop equipment or the slow exhale of a man about to end someone's career. "Brooke," he said, calm as sunrise on a lake, "the lead investor is on my other line, and you just fired the person who holds our compliance keys." The silence after that wasn't just awkward, it was tectonic. Brooke tried to recover. She was streamlining outdated functions, didn't have full context, was told my role was redundant. All of it noise, all of it desperate frequency modulation with no signal underneath. Gerald didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. He just said, "Legal, get me the complete escrow file." Then he disconnected. What happened next was beautiful chaos across 5 different Slack channels. The operations team lit up with engineers asking if they should halt all code pushes. Client support started fielding calls about minor transaction delays. Nothing catastrophic yet, but small hiccups that hinted at something unraveling. Meanwhile, Brooke sat in meetings trying to figure out what escrow protocol actually meant. She'd sat through quarterly reviews where we'd discussed high-risk contingencies, nodded along like a dashboard bobblehead, and immediately forgotten everything that didn't involve synergy or disruption. She didn't realize that when a financial services company promises clients their source code is protected in case of catastrophe, someone has to hold the keys to that vault. That someone had been me, and now the vault was locked. The third-party system had already sent automated alerts the moment my termination synced with their security endpoint. A 96-hour compliance lockout was engaged, source code couldn't be accessed, emergency rollback procedures were disabled. Until an external security review cleared the override, the company's core transaction infrastructure was legally untouchable. They were still flying the plane, but I'd removed the landing gear while they weren't paying attention. At 12:18 p.m., the first system began showing strain. A low-priority integration with a mid-sized credit union failed authentication. The alert went to support first, got flagged as transient, then another ping, this time from the continuous integration pipeline. The build server stalled mid-deployment. At 12:45 p.m., a larger failure cascaded through the system. Transaction processing for 3 major clients slowed to a crawl. Customer service started getting calls. By 1:15 p.m., it was obvious this wasn't random system hiccups. New code couldn't be pushed. Transaction containers wouldn't spin up properly. The access token rotation loop kept hitting authentication failures, and every screen in the building started showing the same message. Secure vault notice, escrow release condition triggered, awaiting external compliance review. Clause 17C engaged. Estimated resolution, 96 hours pending audit completion. At 1:47 p.m., the CTO finally admitted they didn't have override capability. Not just didn't have it, couldn't get it. The process was designed to function like a dead man's switch. If the validator was terminated without proper procedural review filed with Secure Vault and approved by both internal compliance and external auditors, the system assumed hostile action and locked everything down. No access, no code, no client updates, just silence. Across town, Brooke was reportedly pacing in a glass-walled conference room, trying to sketch out workarounds on a whiteboard. One engineer said she asked if they could just comment out the integration point, like this was a college group project and not a $1 million liability with contractual obligations to 180 financial institutions. By then, legal had pulled every version of our Secure Vault agreement. They'd scanned every amendment, called Secure Vault directly. No dice. The protocol was engaged, automated, and audited. Every action from that point forward was time-stamped, reportable, and subject to third-party review. Meanwhile, I was at home, wearing my oldest jeans and a t-shirt from a conference I'd attended in 2003, watching baseball highlights and eating a sandwich that would never make it onto anyone's Instagram. My phone buzzed constantly. I ignored it. Emails stacked like junk mail, unread. A courier knocked with a large manila envelope. I didn't answer the door. They weren't looking for me anymore. They were looking for the function I represented, the missing piece in a system they'd never bothered to understand. Clients started noticing. Not the smaller credit unions yet, but enterprise accounts with SLA agreements thick enough to hire their own lawyers began logging formal inquiries. We're seeing transaction delays and processing errors. Can someone confirm service continuity? Are we within the terms of our master service agreement? You could smell the fear through the fiber optic cables. At 2:15 p.m., our biggest client, a credit union processing network that handled $400 million daily, sent a formal notice of potential contract breach. Their legal team was already reviewing our service level agreements. Other clients began making similar noises. The CTO finally stopped pretending it was just a technical hiccup. He'd been the last one holding the line, kept repeating that these systems were resilient, that they had manual overrides somewhere, that the team just needed time to work. You could almost hear the exact moment he broke. "We need Preston's authorization signature." He didn't say it with any emotion, just resigned, like a man who'd spent 6 hours trying to hotwire a car before realizing the keys were in his pocket the whole time. From what I heard later, the room went dead quiet. Brooke had been mid-sentence about agile problem-solving when he cut her off. The platform doesn't move without his validator token. Not today, not tomorrow, not until that external audit clears or he signs the release. Brooke's face went through what I imagine was a fascinating series of expressions. Okay. So we'll bring him back in, no big deal. This was just a miscommunication, I'll message him. And she did. 2:18 p.m. Brooke Sterling. "Hey Preston, sorry for the confusion earlier. Can we chat for a quick minute? Just need a signature to get things moving again." 2:21 p.m. Brooke Sterling. "Totally understand if you're frustrated, but the team's kind of stuck here. Let's reset this whole thing." 2:25 p.m. Brooke Sterling. "Preston? The whole company is basically frozen right now." 2:28 p.m. Brooke Sterling. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but people's jobs are at stake here. Can we please just talk? I didn't open a single message. Let them sit there like unopened bills." By 2:35 p.m., the lead investor's legal team was already on a call. They weren't warm, they weren't patient, they were surgical. A woman named Lindsay Walsh from the Investor Compliance Office joined the emergency Zoom and didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her first question cut like a blade. Was this a planned termination with board oversight? Brooke tried to recover. We were reviewing operational redundancies, legacy functions that didn't align with our digital roadmap. This was an optimization effort across multiple departments. Where's the board approval for terminating compliance-critical personnel? Board wasn't required for this level. We had discretionary authority for... No. Lindsay's voice could have cut glass. You had discretionary authority for non-critical roles. You terminated someone with third-party validation authority tied to federally regulated escrow protocols. That's not discretionary, that's a compliance breach. Legal started typing like court stenographers on deadline. Brooke tried again. "We can fix this. I'll reach out. He'll understand this was just..." "He's under no obligation to cooperate," Lindsay said. "Not after what you triggered." Gerald finally spoke up. His voice sounded different than I'd ever heard it. Cold. Final. She was on that clause for a reason, Brooke. I trusted him with our most critical kill switch, and you yanked it without reading the manual. The shift was immediate and total. Power flowed away from Brooke like water finding a drain. The CTO stopped making eye contact. HR mysteriously disappeared from the call. Legal was already drafting timeline memos, all while I sat in my garage replacing the brake pads on a 1987 Honda that had more miles on it than some commercial airliners. Calm, methodical, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. My phone rang once, office number. Then again, unknown number. Then Gerald's direct line. I let them all go to voicemail because this wasn't desperation yet. This was early-stage crisis, the part where they still believed I'd answer out of professional courtesy or company loyalty. But those things only exist when people treat you like a professional colleague instead of a cost center that talks back. The reckoning came as an email that evening. Short, clean, efficient. Subject line, proposal for independent oversight engagement from Lindsay Walsh, lead counsel, venture partners. The body contained exactly one sentence. We would like to schedule a conversation regarding independent compliance oversight moving forward. Your terms, no apologies, no explanations, just leverage recognizing leverage. I read it twice, closed my laptop, and went back to working on the Honda. One of us was about to get a complete overhaul. The next morning's call wasn't a Zoom. It was a secure conference bridge, voice only, no recording. Lindsay was joined by the VP of Strategic Holdings and another voice that sounded like she regularly made Fortune 500 executives cry during depositions. They didn't beg, they didn't sell, they offered. Not a return to your previous role, Lindsay said. Independent compliance authority. You'd report directly to us, not to Valent Management. I let the silence stretch. And Brooke? On administrative leave as of this morning. Pending review of unauthorized structural changes and compliance exposure. Autonomous authority over escrow protocols and infrastructure compliance? Yes. Direct budget control for security and compliance initiatives? Yes. No internal interference from management on compliance decisions? Contractually guaranteed with arbitration clauses. I took a breath. Then my answer is yes. The paperwork arrived within 2 hours. It wasn't boilerplate. It was sharp, aggressive, and carved entirely in my favor. Direct reporting line to the investor board. No internal executive could override my compliance findings. Any attempt to remove me required full investor vote and third-party arbitration. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was a firewall with a salary and legal protection. By noon, the internal memo went out. Effective immediately, Preston Hawthorne has been engaged as independent compliance officer, reporting directly to Venture Partners Oversight Board. His authority derives from investor governance and regulatory requirements, not internal management structure. When I returned to the building that afternoon, the security guard handed me a new badge without blinking. Different color, different logo, no department listed, just my title. Oversight, external. I walked past Brooke's old office, empty except for a half-finished protein shake and a whiteboard still covered with arrows pointing toward digital excellence. In the main conference room, Gerald stood at the head of the table. He didn't look angry anymore, just older and maybe finally a little bit wiser. You really built that clause deep, didn't you? He said. I built it right, I replied. He smiled, not warmly, but with something that looked like respect. I should have known better than to let someone with an MBA and no experience fire my best engineer. I didn't answer, just took my seat at the table, the one facing everyone else. Within 48 hours, the system was restored. I'd authorized the security review, signed the compliance releases, and put new protocols in place to prevent future incidents. The 96-hour lockout had cost the company roughly $2.3 million in delayed transactions and client penalties. Expensive lesson, but some lessons are worth their weight in gold. 2 weeks later, I received a message from a junior developer who'd been on that fateful town hall. Preston, not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but that was legendary. Half the engineering team has been talking about it. Finally, someone who knew how to fight back the right way. I didn't reply. I just left it on red, with the same quiet satisfaction I used to get when a perfectly designed system passed its first major stress test. They called it a return, but I hadn't returned to anything. I'd leveled up. Now I was the ghost in their machine with a badge nobody could revoke, a contract written in titanium, and a seat that didn't need anyone's permission to exist. The only question left was, who else had forgotten that some problems solve themselves if you're patient enough to let them? Because I was done fixing things for people who thought expertise was just another word for expensive overhead. Appreciate you sticking around. If you made it this far and haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. Every subscription is like a small victory for everyone who's ever been called legacy by someone who couldn't build a paper airplane without breaking compliance.